I grew up in a drug infested, dysfunctional household where there was always drugs being used, grown in the backyard. My dad was a violent alcoholic, so there was a lot of abuse going on. Got a knife pulled on me, I was 7, and the first time one of my friends was killed by gun violence, I was 9. I drank from the moment I woke up until either I passed out. I was drinking basically anytime my eyes were open. I want to change, but I do not know how. When I got let back in the general population, that there was another inmate that introduced me to Jesus. And that's what changed my life forever.
Chris has been sober since 2013 and sounds like you were incarcerated at once, and I can't wait to get into his story. Chris, thanks for being here. I'm glad that sent you my way.
You're welcome. It's a blessing to be able to share my story.
What was life like for you when you were growing up?
Honestly, I grew up from before I can even walk. I grew up in a drug infested, dysfunctional household where there was always drugs being used, grown in the backyard. My dad was a violent alcoholic, so there was a lot of abuse going on, a lot of like he would hit my mom a lot. And then back before OJ Simpson, they really didn't do nothing for domestic violence in California. It wasn't until after all that happened that they started actually protecting the women. So my mom would never press charges. So every single day it was the same thing. My dad would go from work to the bar, from bar home. Cops would show up, take him to the drunk tank, repeat. And so there was a lot of violence and a lot of drugs.
Wow. Rinse and repeat.
Pretty much until they got divorced. Yeah.
So did domestic violence lead to their divorce? I mean, was that like the breaking point?
No, honestly, there was my dad ended up getting himself in some other trouble. He did have to go to court. He did have to go to jail for a little bit, but my mom ended up getting into finding another boyfriend basically, and they're still married till today.
Wow.
So they got divorced and my mom found someone else.
Well, sounds like she got out of a messy situation.
Yes. But you know what? My mom's doing awesome today. My mom and my dad, they talk and everything's, been reconciled and they have a good relationship just as obviously friends.
That's
So,
good.
that's a positive
Yeah.
thing.
Do you think that's what led you obviously to drinking and using?
That and where I grew up wasn't the greatest environment growing up right on the border of LA and Orange County. But yes, I started using really young because I was trying to fill the pain, the void. Really, what I've learned today is that back when I was a kid, I felt unloved. So I was trying to get that acceptance and do all the things to fill that. And that also led to, basically getting involved with gangs, but that really has nothing to do with, using. But that was a big part of my life as well. So you could say I got addicted to that as well, to the gang lifestyle.
I literally just got off a podcast with somebody that was into gangs too, but in Chicago.
That's pretty cool. Only if
So,
only if they're doing good now though.
yes, you guys must have very similar stories. That must have been, there's so much chaos growing up, being around gangs. What did using look like for you?
Using for me, honestly, it's crazy to say it, but as a young kid, I would I was using a lot of LSD because they couldn't test me for it because on juvenile probation. They couldn't test you back then because the ways they had to do it, they weren't approved to do it. And so, but personally, I didn't really have I would say a favorite drug. I just mixed them all. And
Okay.
so I was mixing basically alcohol with marijuana, with meth, with heroin, with, hallucinogens, pills, whatever came my way or whatever I had, I would just use it all. And that was like my daily life,
Oh,
all the way up until I would say right before my last prison sentence in California. And then when I went in there, I was still using heroin in there.
mm,
And then I ended up quitting while I was in there and I never touched that again.
wow. So, man, there's so much to your story. Was there a specific turning point or influence that like pushed you more into addiction?
More into addiction, I would say A lot of times it was my dad, and it was losing friends all the time to that gang lifestyle.
Like losing, what do you mean by losing? Like,
And because the first time I got a knife pulled on me, I was 7, and the first time one of my friends was killed by gun violence, I was 9. And so yeah, and so really, like, a lot of that, like, I would have a really hard time, especially like the anniversary of my friends getting killed, to where all I
yeah.
want to do is just go get obliviated and then go do dumb stuff, to try to just fill that void of them not being around no more. And with my dad, even on the times I would, like, he never really had nothing positive to say.
Mm.
And so what would happen was is when he would sit there and talk down to me or put me down, it would make me want to go use more to try to fill that void of all the hurt I was feeling.
I'm currently listening to the book, The Body Keeps the Score, and I feel like when those anniversaries came, your body was, like, holding that trauma, and so that's how you reacted. I mean, it's a perfect example of how our bodies literally keep, you know, they hold onto so much trauma throughout our lives.
Yeah.
And, you were, one that witnessed domestic violence, which is a very, very hard thing for young children. Did you ever see prison coming, or was it a surprise?
Honestly, I from a teenager all the way up to I came to Idaho, I was either like on the streets or incarcerated. There was really no in between. So, you know, I first got in the system in 1992, like actually on probation as a juvenile, and I stayed in the system all the way up till 2024.
Wow.
Basically in and out, in and out. And so really, I guess to answer your question, I knew I was going to end up getting caught one day, you know, for something that was going to send me to prison, but I didn't know if that was going to be prison or death, because just because of the Russian roulette I was playing every day, not only with the using the drugs, but also with the gang banging.
Yeah. Wow. What was Can you give us an example of what a day looked like for you back when you were younger?
When I was out in the community where I grew up,
Yeah.
honestly, a lot of times I didn't sleep. I would just stay up for days on end and wander the streets. And during the day, I would like try to hang out at people's houses. And most of the time I was selling drugs from those houses. I would pick different spots in the city just to sell drugs at while I was there. And then as soon as nighttime came, I would wander the streets and walk every street and every alley, because my mindset at the time was as if I can't catch anybody that's say one of my enemies, then I know all my friends are okay. And so I would basically walk the streets and protect the whole city.
Wow. Has to be terrifying
I honestly was
or
so
into
lost and so broken that I guess you could say I wasn't scared at all. I just, it was just a normal everyday thing for me.
and so you witnessed a lot of violence outside your home, in your home,
And in the prison system.
oh, well, yeah. What was your darkest moment?
Honestly, I think one of my darkest moments was right before I went to prison in California. I think it was the second to last time, because that was when one of my really close friends was killed. And that was when I made a choice to start using needles. And before that, I would never use needles. I would just basically snort everything, even heroin. And so that was after that he was killed, I made a choice to start using needles. And that was when I kind of went off the deep end, and I just went and started hunting the streets. And it was a blessing in disguise, because from that moment on, I think I got out for 13 days. Then I went back and got out for, I would think, within 30 days, they were already looking for me again and got it. So every time I couldn't stay out after that. It was just a
Mm.
back and forth, but it was a blessing because of where my mindset was at. But I think when I started using with needles was when that was my darkest.
Now that I've been sober and I realize that alcohol is actually more deadly than heroin, like, what is your how do you what do you feel on that?
Honestly, I was using everything, but where I think alcohol is more dangerous is because you can buy it at any convenience store. And
Right.
you can buy, and see, here you have to actually go to a liquor store to buy hard liquor.
True.
In California, you can walk into an Albertsons, you can walk into any store where they sell candy and soda and buy a bottle of tequila or vodka. And so, for me, I drank from the moment I woke up until either I passed out. And if I woke, on top of the drugs, I was drinking basically anytime my eyes were open, and so on top of using all that other stuff. And really, since I've been in Idaho, I interstate compacted here and I didn't use no drugs while I was here, but I was drinking a lot. And my mom asked me one time why I was doing that. And I told her, well, I'm not using heroin, I'm not using meth. I says, what does it matter? And that's honestly what led to me picking up a 15-year sentence here back in 2009
Oh,
because I was drinking.
trying to put the pieces together. So you got sober in 2013?
Yes. And then I was released from prison in 2014.
So
And
you
I did
went
the and I did the last 9 years, 10 months on parole out here in the community.
getting sober in 2014, but still part of the system until 2024.
Yeah, no, I got sober 2013. I got released in 2014, but I was in the system until April of 24.
How did you get sober in in prison? I mean,
W-
okay, so I know that sounds like a really weird question, but if you were using in prison,
Yes, in California, I was, if I want to back up there, what happened was the affiliation I was once involved with, you're not allowed to touch methamphetamine. So that's a blessing when I was in the California system, but you're allowed to use heroin. So I was still using heroin. At the time, my cellie had been locked up since 1975. And so he had a lot of connections. So we were using heroin over in the California system. And what happened is one day I had just got done, slamming heroin, and they called night yard. And I went out to night yard and I was walking the track. And I remember like just I know what it is today, but back then I didn't understand it. But a little voice in my head was telling me, how are you ever going to stop using if you can't even stop in here?
wow.
And I went back to my cell and I told him I'm done using it. And I got sick and I never touched heroin since. And so then when I came to Idaho, I was drinking a lot. I picked up that case. I basically went to prison. I got in more trouble and they put me in solitary for 3 years out here in Idaho. I spent 3 years in a cell by myself. And I had a lot of time to think. And I ended up, I was just like, I remember telling myself, I want to change, but I do not know how.
Right.
And the reality of it is right when I got let back in the general population, that there was another inmate that introduced me to Jesus. And that's what changed my life forever.
Oh, I love
And
that.
so I've been sober since that day.
Wow.
Because you are right. Inside there before that point, I was still making alcohol. I was still using marijuana at times when I can get it, when it was given to me, even why in prison here.
Fun little note, we're both from Idaho, for those that are watching. I actually have quite a few people from Idaho that watch my podcast and engage. But alcohol, going into prison, did you have any withdrawals, or were you just able to instantly use the other drugs and make your own alcohol to keep you from, like, detoxing?
Honestly, I just went cold turkey into Ada County Jail, and I really didn't have no problems, which was a good thing. And it may have been because really I wouldn't drink 7 days a week here because I worked back during the recession. I was working graveyard shift Maverick. I was working weekends at Pizza Hut, but I would drink from Friday to Sunday nonstop. And then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I wouldn't drink because I was running a cash register on graveyard shift. And I knew my PO can walk in there anytime, so
I mean, Idaho's not near as big as California, that's for sure. But
no.
we did get all the Californians. So, do you mind sharing what put you in the system for the 15 years?
So what ended up happening, my last sentence, what happened was, is like I said, I was drinking a lot and I got invited to a party. And what ended up happening was I went to this party and I had asked anybody, hey, is any other guys showing up? Because there was a bunch of girls showing up and I didn't really know anybody. And so I only knew the people I went with. And what ended up happening was, is some guy showed up, and in all reality, he was, because of the color that he was wearing, and because of what he said, he was a rival gang member. And so then he said something, I reacted, other people got involved, it turned into a big old mess. And by God's grace that he didn't die. Ended up happening was, is I chose to stab him. And what ended up happening was I told the other guys, I says, don't worry, if you guys get arrested for this, I'm gonna go turn myself in. And they arrested the other guy because nobody knew who I was. And so I walked into the parole office and turned myself in. And I thought I was getting a life sentence no matter what, because I already had 2 strikes in California. And by God's grace, Idaho don't have the 3-strike law. And
Mm.
so they offered me 30 years. And I was like, no. And then they said, we'll drop the weapons enhancement and offer you 15. And I did the math. At the time I was 32. I'll be out when I'm 47. All right, let's do it. And so, not knowing that I would have had a chance to get out sooner, I thought I was going to have to do the whole 15 years straight. But I was okay
Oh,
with that because it was better than a life sentence.
wow. So, were the ones in California similar?
It was all gang related. Everything there was either gun convictions or criminal gang activity, street terrorism.
Wow. So, you grew up in violence and put yourself in violence,
Yes.
but
And the
now
truth was, is I really look back at it. I had so much anger and so much pain and so much hurt from what I went through as a child. I was taking it out on all the people in the streets.
right?
Protecting a city and a street that doesn't even belong to me. I
Right.
look back on it. It's crazy.
Yeah. Did you have people who stayed by you, or were you completely alone
While I was inside there,
through all of it?
my mom, I would always stop at her house like when I was out there. Um, Me and her boyfriend, what's her husband now, but it was her boyfriend back then. We didn't see eye to eye. We didn't get along. And so we always bumped heads a lot. But other than that, if I was walking by my mom's house, I would always stop by there and see her. And sometimes I would stay the night there just in the living room on the couch and from time to time. But also towards the end, it got to a point to where like even trying, I was just at her house one day and just leaving. Right when I walk into the alley, bullets were flying at me, them trying to shoot me. So,
Mm.
I kind of didn't want to be around her house because of that, because I never wanted to bring any of that to anywhere that it wasn't intended for them. And they were trying to get me, so it wouldn't be fair if they would have got like my little brothers or something like that.
Yeah.
And so, but yes, I had places that I can stay at. Like there was a couple families that I stayed at. I grew up living at their house as well as a
And,
kid.
and all while all of this is happening, you're still fully just drinking and doing other drugs.
Yes.
And you
Yes.
were drinking in the morning. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I would wake up and like let's say if I had something I left open right there, I would just grab it and finish it and then go get more. And but I think honestly, I learned a system. I learned a system between meth and alcohol and heroin, how to navigate to where I never really had the hangovers as much. I had, but like that was more or less when I would first get out and I would just drink like if I never was busted, then I would have a bad hangover and stuff like that. But I just learned how to navigate with the different drugs and mix them in a certain way to not have withdrawals as bad, if that makes sense.
I do want to get to, how you found faith, but what role did shame or guilt play during those years?
During those years of me before I found God, I
Yeah.
honestly had no remorse. I had no guilt. I had no shame for any of the choices I was making because I thought in my head what I was doing was to protect the people I love. And in a way I was just going about it the wrong way.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
wasn't until I did find my faith that that hit me hard.
You said you found Jesus while you were still incarcerated by one of the other guys in prison?
So what happened was is when I got out of ADSEC from being in solitary all those years, that I ended up going to a close custody unit. And right there, the way Idaho is, they say you have to do a pathway, like you have a fixed and an undeterminate on your sentence. And mine was I had to serve 5 years. After 5 years, I was eligible for parole, and but I still had 10-year tail. And so what happened was is I told all the homies I'm gonna go try to do that program because I had to do a specific program in order to have a chance to get out on my fixed. And they all laughed at me. And they said, there is no way they're letting you go into general population, especially into a dorm style living, because I had too many points. And what
Mm.
ended up happening was, is the unit manager at the time, because it was still the private prison, he said, if they come interview you, I'll go to bat for you. And what ended up happening was, is they came to interview me, and it was the craziest interview I've ever had. Why being incarcerated. He said, promise me if we let you go out here, you're not going to go stab one of those guys. And I said, I just want a chance to go home like everybody else. Because I knew if I didn't do this program, I would have to stay there till 2024. And so I got approved to go to the program. The very first night in there, I was just sitting on my bed with my mattress rolled up with my shoes on, and I was just tripping out because I went from not seeing anybody to a dorm with 112 people. And so I was just staring at everybody. And finally, one of the little homies came up to me and he said, homie, it's okay. You can take your shoes off. You can roll your mattress. Everything's going to be all right. And so I went to sleep. And the next day, I was told to tell this gentleman that, well, that basically your friend said that to do good and go home because he had been in there for 18 years already. He got locked up when he was 17. And
Oh,
and he said, I don't go by that name no more. My name is Steven. And I said, okay. And then all of a sudden he was doing a Bible study. And it kind of blew me away because here's this guy that I had heard a bunch of stories about like he was a really violent man. But here he is hosting a Bible study. So I was tripping out. And then a few days go by, a few more days go by, and on the 10th day I was on that tier to be exact, a little voice in my head said, the time is now to serve me. And it was almost like I went on autopilot. Like I didn't even understand it, but I just went straight up to him and said, I want to give my life to Jesus and I want to join your Bible study. And how do I get a Bible? And I surrendered my life to God that day. And then I walked up to my affiliation and I said, you know what? I just gave my life to Jesus. I'm done with this life. If you accept it, you accept it. If you don't, I don't care. And I turned around and walked away. And I've
wow.
never looked back.
Wow. So, how did your mindset and action start to change after that?
Well, right away, as crazy is how God works. Immediately, me and that same guy, we made a deal. If any of us cusses, we have to do push-ups. So that's how I overcame cussing really quick because I don't like push-ups. And
I
and
should do
then as
that.
far as like it was weird because I had a bunch of like it's Chicano rap and it was all about violence. It was all about killing. I had that on my MP3 player. And so immediately I erased all the music. I was getting Maxim magazines immediately. I just would grab them when they would come in the mail. I'd throw them in the trash. It was like God just transformed me like overnight. And he had me
Wow.
start reading in Acts. Out of all places, I started reading in Acts. And right away I got to chapter 8 and seeing how Saul at the time had Stephen stoned to death, and how in chapter 9 he's on his way to Damascus and how Jesus meets him where he's at. And I related so much to him that I studied him. I studied him the whole time I was in prison and the first year I was out of prison. That's all I did was study Paul.
So,
God spoke to my heart to start in Acts.
okay, yeah, because I was going to ask you if there was like a certain scripture or moment.
I woke up quoting a scripture, not understanding it, not even knowing exactly where it was at, but I figured it out, and that's Second Chronicles 7:14. If my people who are called by my name would humble themselves and pray and turn from the wicked ways, I will hear from heaven, forgive their sin, and heal their land. I woke up one morning just quoting that, and then eventually I figured out where it was at, and really the blessing in there is I would be able to read for like 8, 9 hours straight. I just couldn't get enough.
That's awesome. So what was your, like, first prayer conversation with God like?
Really, with God,
Mhm.
really, I basically forgave everyone that tried to kill me, right? And all the people that hurt me in my life. And that was really easy for me. The hardest thing was for me to forgive myself because all the drugs I sold, all the violence I committed, Satan kept reminding me of the ripple effect that my past had and the thousands of lives that were hurt and affected by my choices. And a lot of people go like, How is it thousands of lives?" And it's because really when you do the stuff I was doing, that it doesn't just affect, say, that individual or their family, it affects the whole community.
Right.
It really does. Like the community's in fear because of the stuff that's being done out there. And so I was having such a hard time forgiving myself, but it was kind of cool because one day I was just talking to God and I was just being raw and real with them. Like, I can't forgive myself for the things I did. And what happened was, is God spoke to me so clearly. He says, I've already forgiven you. If you want to have complete peace, you need to forgive yourself. And
That's
then
a
I was
hard
like,
one.
okay. And from that moment forward, I forgave myself. But it was kind of funny because I had ordered a yearly devotional Bible, and it's called Christian Right Living from Charles Stanley from In Touch Ministries. Because there's a lot of websites or a lot of places you could write, and they'll send you free books while you're incarcerated, Bibles, all kinds of stuff. And so I took advantage of all that to get as much as I could to read. And in that package, I got a book called The Gift of Forgiveness, what I didn't even ask for. And so that book was an amazing book too.
Wow. I think I'm glad that you mentioned that because I feel like forgiving ourselves is one of the hardest things possible. And I think I did another podcast with somebody else recently that mentioned that he had to forgive himself. And I mean, I have to work on that because that is one of the hardest things because then, yeah, we forgive ourselves, but does everybody else forgive us? Or are they just going to keep holding us to our past?
Yeah. And where I'm at, where as far as people forgiving me for the things I did, I have no control over that.
Right.
So if would I love, them to reach out or me to be able to run into them and basically, hey, and ask them, hey, will you forgive me for this? I would love that. But I also know there are circumstances to where that's not a safe path to cross, depending, because of the circumstances of some of those situations. And so
Yeah.
I have no control over that. And I pray all the time that the people would forgive me for all the bad things I did. I know that when the couple times I have went back to California, I've got to see people, and just by the way I'm living now is just a testimony. The fact that I'm sober, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a huge thing. So, and I want to get into what your life is like now, but first I want to kind of like, what was the hardest part about re-entering society for you?
Honestly, it was learning. I was always a good worker. Finding a job's never been an issue in my life. But it was like learning how to pay bills, learning how to just like the normal everyday thing people that it was really hard. There was one moment to where this is gonna sound funny, but there was one moment I was on the way to pay all my bills to because that was when I was living in Boise. And so I was going to the post office over there by River. I think it's like 13th or 16th, that little post office over there by the skate park. And I can't remember the exact street it's on, but it's somewhere right there. And my coffee spilled on my bills. And so I'm thinking, and then I'm thinking one of them's for the parole office. It's my cost of supervision. So I'm thinking they're gonna think that I'm all messing up because I'm sending these in all dirty. And right away the enemy started messing with my head,
Mm.
telling me that, see, you can't make it out here, you belong in prison. And I just started crying as I was driving. And then this song came on the radio, which is my friend Pastor Allen, it's his daughter. and her husband. It's called He Rescued Me. And it's basically a song they wrote about how Jesus rescues us. And I just, man, I lost it and just started crying, but it was almost like God brought healing to me in that moment. And so then I just told Satan to shut up and get out of my head, but like little things like that were hard. And another really hard thing for me was it was in 2016, the end of 2016. Um, I'm a plumber, and so I was working in my old boss's front. He owned the front house. I lived in the studio in the back. Basically, I lived in a single car garage my first 3 years out. It was converted to a studio, like half of it,
Mm.
half of a single car garage. And so a few days prior to that, I had fell on the snow, like coming down like the Home Alone style, to where you just slip and you clear the whole staircase. And
Wow.
I had a camera and a locator in my hand, so I chose not to drop those. And I hurt my arm really bad. And so at the time, there was a kid living in the front house who was struggling with addiction. And he knew I fell and he thought it would be a good idea to hit my elbow. And I remember I didn't even have the thought of doing anything bad to him. But in that moment, I felt my anger come up a little bit. So I just told my boss, I'm going home. And I just stopped what I was doing. I walked out the back door to go through the backyard to get to my house. And I just heard this roar, and that guy assaulted me. And when he assaulted me, the crazy part about it is I didn't even have a thought of fighting back. I just basically protected myself so I couldn't get hurt. But that was a hard time in my life because what ended up happening was one of my good friends, he's one of my mentors. He's a retired sheriff from Ada County. And I called him right away to tell him what happened. And he said, Chris, you got to move. He said, because all he has to do is call and say you did something and you have no rights. And he goes, and I'll fight to get you out, but you're going to go in there for a while. And so I started trying to find somewhere to rent to me. And as a felon, it was impossible
Hmm.
at that time. So one of the guys at Calvary, he told me you should try to buy a house. And I'm like, yeah, right. I didn't even have credit. I didn't exist in the credit world. I had got my first car at 28% interest at the end of 2015.
Oh boy.
That was my introduction into the credit world. And I thought it was a great deal, and everyone thought I was crazy with 28% interest. And so the first lender said there's nothing we could do for you. And then he's like, let's try again. And I'm like, no, I'm good. And then finally, God said, stop being stubborn. What's it going to hurt? And so I didn't even have a 600 credit score, and God got me approved to buy the house I have now.
Oh wow.
And so I moved in here in 2017. And so, but that was a hard
Yeah.
time because to answer your question, I was on my hands and knees so many times crying out to God because I couldn't find nowhere to live. And I kept telling myself, if I didn't have Jesus, I would have gave up already. But they've changed the system now. I have a whole list of felon friendly places to help people now.
As in, like, what do you mean help people?
Like to get apartments and stuff when like there's a bunch of places that'll work with people to get apartments now, even if they have felonies.
Okay, so is that something that you kind of took charge or like got really involved in?
That what?
Is that something that you got really involved in?
Well, yes, before I got out of prison, serving God, God spoke to me and said, when you get out, I want you to go back into the streets where I pulled you out of. So I've been doing homeless outreach
Oh wow.
since I walked out of prison, basically. And not only that, Calvary Boise, I'm bivocational. Um, I'm one of the bivocational pastors. I'm not on staff, but I basically oversee 3 ministries there. I oversee our Words of Freedom Addiction Recovery Ministry, and I oversee our prison jail ministry, which I'm actively going inside and doing Bible studies. And then I oversee the homeless outreach.
That is absolutely amazing. I love that. So I was going to ask, did your faith help guide that transition? And it sounds like it really did help guide
Yes.
that transition.
Yes. No, it really did help with, like, honestly, anytime, like, God, that's what, if you truly keep God in the center of all you do, you're going to be okay. You're going to have hard days. You're going to go through trials. The enemy is going to put stuff in your head that really you just got to lay it at the feet of Jesus and say, I know that's not of God. because God wouldn't ask me to go out there and use. God wouldn't ask me to go out there and be disrespectful. He wouldn't ask me to go hurt somebody. You know, He would never ask me those things. And
Right.
I've learned when you keep God in the center at all times and you rely on His strength and His guidance and His wisdom, you can get through any obstacle.
Yeah. S- Yeah. I can relate to that. So, what did sobriety look like in those first few months out?
First few months out, I honestly, I have the same boundaries I set now. That I've been following the same boundaries. I won't, obviously, if I go out to eat at a restaurant, it's different because I know that, they serve, obviously, they serve alcohol everywhere. But I won't go into a bar. I guess unless I'm fixing plumbing. Then for my job, I go in and fix plumbing and sometimes in bars, but I really don't ever put myself in situations that would jeopardize my freedom in any way, shape, or form. I've set those healthy boundaries and I stick to them.
So, ever since like, as soon as you quit, those were the boundaries?
Yes.
Okay. So, um, what other boundaries do you have?
Well, doesn't really relate. It doesn't really have nothing to do with addiction. But another boundaries is like when it comes to people getting out of prison, if I know they're still like gang banging or using and all that, I won't go to their house. I won't get in a car with them. If they really want to talk to me, I tell them meet me in the lobby at Calvary. And I like those healthy boundaries I have. And as far as like um really when it comes to like even doing ministry, I will never put anybody of the opposite sex in my car without somebody else in the car. For instance, if someone needs a ride home from Thursday night service and they're a female, well, I grab one of the brothers and says, "You're going with me." And these are just all boundaries I set just to basically because how Titus it talks about that basically that don't do anything to perceive you're doing something wrong. That's just me
Right.
paraphrasing it. But so and because of the stuff I've witnessed and stuff that I've seen even happen within church, that's why you know what those are healthy boundaries that I have set.
Right. That's a good boundary to have. So, just are you a licensed plumber now?
Yes, I'm a journeyman plumber. I don't have my contractors. I took 4 years ago. I started in September 2014, a few months after I got out, and I got my journeyman license in 2018.
Wow. So that's absolutely amazing. I mean, you've come from literally the streets to being a journeyman.
Yes.
Good for you.
No, God amazes me all the time. Like He's blessed me with the house I live in. He's blessed me with the career. He's blessed me. He's chosen me to basically shepherd ministries, which is crazy to me. And then one of the desires of my heart were to go back into the prisons and do Bible studies. And I'm currently able to go back into multiple facilities. Every other Saturday, I'm in two different facilities doing Bible studies. I also have volunteers in other facilities. We also have the men coming from the work center to church on Sunday.
Wow.
And then he gave me a wife, blessed me with a wife in 2019. We got married. We met at church in the park in 2016. And so, so many things that were not possible before I surrendered to God.
Wow. So that's a huge transition from where you came from.
Yes. Yes. Now, instead of running around the streets, I've gotten cultured into going to ballets, to operas, to all those like different things I would have never thought. And I like it all.
I want to talk a little bit about your boundary and how you said you don't go into bars. Like, what about, for instance, I mean, you're in the area, so like a restaurant like Bardonnay, like it's a nicer restaurant and the bar is like wide open. It's a distillery, right? Do you go to places like that?
Yes. Yes. Like
Okay.
somewhere where I can like me and my wife can go for dinner or lunch, then yeah. Or even like when I work in Tamarack or I work in McCall a lot. I'm in Tamarack almost every week. Like they have the little places right on the main strip right there in Donley. Like
Mm.
I want to say the Roost or Cougar Dave's to where yes, it's a bar, but they also serve food. we go eat there because you don't really have many choices there, you
Right.
know. But as far as like going into just like say to go hang out in a bar for any other reason other than to eat food, no,
Right.
if that
No,
makes sense.
I no, it totally makes sense because I think my first time so I got sober actually, we're recording on July 9th, so 2 years ago is when I had my last drink. But I went so that was July 2023, and I think my first time, uh, I went to a brewery, it was during the Festival of Trees or something like that, and I think a lot of people question me, and it's like, "Well, I went in there for nachos." Like, I went in there for food, you're right, like, if you're going to a place for food, because I think it might trigger a lot of people if they go into certain places, but I went to 10 Barrel, and I love their nachos, I got a soda water and lime, and we split a burger, but I think, go people ask all the time, "Would you go to a bar?" And I never really liked bars anyways, so is that something that you would recommend people just, like, completely avoiding all in all, not even testing it?
And honestly, every person, it depends on them and how strong they are in their sobriety. Like if I know, like
Yeah.
for instance, from the Words of Freedom service, I would never tell anybody, "Hey, let's go eat at 10 Barrel." I've actually never been to 10 Barrel, but I would myself, but I would never ask someone to go eat there. I would say, "Hey, let's go eat at like Red Robin or somewhere like, that's more of a restaurant," just because I don't know where they're at in their sobriety. I don't know how strong they are in their sobriety, and I would never want to do anything to cause someone else to stumble. I know with me,
Right.
I didn't even start going to those places and like even to eat at Bardonnay until I met my wife. Like I never walked into anything even like that before I met my wife. And just because I I probably didn't even know they had food, you know. She was the one who said, "Hey, let's go eat here." And then when she told me what it was, I said, "Oh, that's a brewery. I have to get permission from my parole officer to go there." And so then I sent an email to my parole officer asking permission, and they said, "Yeah." Because that's the thing about parole. Anywhere that makes more money off alcohol than food, you have to get permission to go,
Oh,
is the way it was explained to me.
okay. Which, to be fair, I feel like almost any restaurant makes more money on alcohol than they do food, but, I mean,
Yeah,
that's just my opinion, I guess, because, I mean, they rack up, what, 15 bucks for a drink, and
yeah,
your hamburger's, like, 11 bucks?
yeah. And honestly, I don't know. I have not purchased any alcoholic beverage since 2009, right before I went to prison here.
Oh, wow.
And but my two hangouts were Mulligans and the Whitewater.
Oh. Sorry. If those that are local would I mean, I assume would know what those places are, but wow. I mean, I can see that it seems like they're like little holes in the wall, right?
I chose those because I was on parole and I knew that the parole officers were going to be more down the strip by, the Bistro and China Blue and all those ones, and all the ones down there. And then in Meridian, I had an inside person that would tell me, "Hey, they were just in here." So I knew I had a few weeks to hang out there before they would be back.
Well, you could just park at the Albertsons and walk across the street. What's one thing that you still wrestle with even today?
One thing I wrestle with still today is just really sometimes it's just hard for me to believe like where my life's at today, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Oh, totally.
It's
Yeah.
like I think of where I was at. I know 100% I shouldn't be alive. I know 100% I should be doing life in prison. But God chose me. God saved me.
Yeah.
And I know just by the drugs I used to mix, there's no way, shape, or form that I should still have a brain. And from all the studies I read by reading all the stuff I've read, I shouldn't be in my right mind from spending 3 years in a cell by myself.
Yeah.
But somehow, by God's grace, He saved me from all that, and He's allowed me just to continue to, live my best life ever. These last, what it'll be, I just celebrated 11 years of being out in June, and it'll be 12 years since I gave my life to Jesus in a couple days or a week and a half. And so sometimes I struggle with that, but I guess you could say in other ways that sometimes, like, because of the way I was raised and the way I was brought up, sometimes like my mind, the way, like, I have little OCD things that are really hard. Like, I check the door a lot of times before I leave. I'll check to make sure all the lights are off 5 times. And my wife figured it out, like I have a number in my head, and and it drives her crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Uh,
that answered your question, but
yeah. The day that you gave your life to Jesus is the day that you got sober.
I was sober longer than that, but I can't put a date on it.
Okay.
I can't put a date on it. For a long time, I started it from the day I walked out of prison, right? But then I thought about it. Well, I know 100% I haven't done nothing since I surrendered to Jesus. So why am I going to not take credit for those almost that year, almost a year. So that's why I went with the July 20th, because I know that's the day 100% I haven't done anything. But I can say, if I had a guess, it probably would have been in the end of 2012 was the last time I made alcohol while I was at IMSI. I just can't remember the exact time, so I chose to start it when I surrendered to God.
It amazes me that people can sneak drugs and make alcohol in prison.
Well, honestly, California made it really difficult to make alcohol because they stopped giving you all the ingredients in your food. But
Mhm.
Idaho gives you all the ingredients, like with your or everyday meals. And so really, and they let you buy bags of sugar, which even makes it easier.
Oh,
And so you're able to buy sugar, and then they give you oranges all the time. They give you apples. They give you this little hoagie roll that was good for the yeast part of it to get it to blow up. And so, yeah,
interesting. Did you know how to make alcohol before you went to prison, or did you guys just all learn from each other?
I learned in the California prison system.
I really wanted to know.
No, I learned how to make it in there.
So do you believe that your time in prison, like, legitimately saved your life?
That that the Lord, 100%. If I can tell you right now, if I wanted to surrender to Jesus, I wouldn't have got out. And
Which
this is why I say that. Because less than a week into my walk with God, we were having Bible study, and I asked my friend Steven, I says, what if we're disrespected in those ways that are fighting words in prison? Now that we're serving God. He goes, I don't know. It's never happened to me. Well, that same day, the program that we were in, it was the pre-TC program, therapeutic community, where there was this thing called Expo One, to where I was told I had to pull someone up. And it's almost like calling them out. Like, I'm pulling you
Mhm.
up because you're not in the day room when you're supposed to be in the day room. Well, this guy's response to me was, let's fight. And I'm like not even a week into my walk with God. But it was weird because I had complete peace, and God was telling me, just stare him in the eyes and don't say nothing. And the guy was causing a scene. He was saying, "Come on, we could both go back to Max." And he headbutt forehead to forehead. We're touching foreheads, and he's telling me, "Let's fight." But God kept just telling me, "Look him in the eye and don't say nothing." And then finally, a peace came over me, and it said, "Turn around and walk away." And I turned around and walked away. And that was the hardest 3-day battle I fought in my life, because I don't know if you remember the cartoon, like I think it was either Tom and Jerry or Bugs Bunny. One of them were the little devil and the little angel in the ear. Well, Satan kept saying, go make a knife and stab him. And God kept telling me he was proud of me.
Oh,
And so after 3 days of fighting that battle, I finally overcame that, but it wasn't easy. But that was the day that I knew I can trust God with my life,
yeah.
because I was able to walk away from that situation. And that Satan was trying to get me to make a knife and stab the guy, you know,
Did you know anything about, believing when you were younger?
like about God.
Yeah.
So I knew I got dripped on. I call it dripped on because when I was 19 years old, the marshals were looking for me. And so I went on the run with one of my connections to Reno, Nevada. Not unknowingly, his best friend was my childhood friend's dad, who happened to be a meth cook in Reno, Nevada.
Mm.
And so he was just giving me all the meth. He just kept saying, "Don't tell him nothing," because he was selling it to his friend, but he was giving it to me for free. And so I was working under the table at a cabinet shop because I couldn't work legitimately because I was on the run. And so I was working under the table at a cabinet shop, strung out, and this guy approached me. He was an employee. He approached me and said, "I know you're on drugs. I could smell it coming out of your pores." He said, "You have two choices." He said, "I can call the cops on you right now, or you can go to this place I know." And I was like, "Well, what's this place you know?" And it ended up being a Christian men's home.
Oh.
So I went in the Christian men's home. I never surrendered all to God. Did I say the prayer? Yes, I did say it. But do I believe that I was saved? Honestly, according to scripture, yes, but I didn't know God. Because it says all who call on the name of the Lord will be saved in Romans 10:13. But I never surrendered to God. I continued to use drugs while I was in there. I started stealing money while I was in there from the
Mm.
places they were sending me to clean. And I got told on, and I called the guy out to fight in front of the pastor.
Wow.
And they didn't give up on me. They sent me to another place, but that place was in Sacramento, California. And then when I was in that one, it was more of a youth setting, so it was more people like my age. And so I was doing better in the sense I wasn't using drugs no more. I wasn't stealing no more, but I still hadn't fully surrendered. Like I wouldn't surrender. I basically found myself in a situation where some of the people turned against me because of my gang affiliation, because Northern California and Southern California don't get along. And right away, my response to that was, "See, God, I knew you weren't real."
Mm.
And I hated him so much. Like I had a vendetta against him to where I even started, I wouldn't say I ever practiced it, but I started reading the Satanic Bible
Oh.
a little bit. And, but I never did none of the rituals. I never like acted it out. I just started dibble dabbling in that. And so from that point forward, that anybody that tried to talk to me about God, I would just shut them down right then and there. I had many people come and try to talk to me, and I would just like close that door. I wouldn't give them the time of day. And I think back to it now. Yeah, I wasn't like disrespectful, like cuss them out, but I was rude because I would just be like, I have nothing to say to you, and I don't want to hear it. So just basically kick rocks. And
Mm.
it was like that all the way up until I ended up surrendering to God. But I also believe when I did surrender to God, because it says God's word doesn't come back void, a lot of the stuff that I was hearing in those at the in church or at the Bible studies, the scripture started coming back to me.
If you could speak to the younger version of yourself, like maybe on the first day in prison, what do you think you would say to yourself?
Honestly, that's a hard one because part of me would want to basically say, "Hey, you don't want to go down that path. You don't want to do this. You don't want to do that," you know. And but the other part of me, I believe I wouldn't be who I am today in Christ if I didn't go through all that.
Right.
If I didn't, I wouldn't have the compassion I have for the people out there that the world's given up on. Because I was once that person the world gave up on. Because in California, the prison system, the judicial system, my last sentence in California, their exact words is, "There's no hope for you. You're a lost cause. You're a menace to society. And you're going to spend life in prison or you're going to end up dead." And that was the last thing they told me.
And now you're changing lives.
Yes.
What does your friend group look like now?
My friend group looks like now, a lot of my friends are like one of my really close friends is the detective that arrested me in Idaho. Yeah. You know, we're really good friends now. Basically, so police officers, detectives, like all different people. Like there's so many different walks of life at church. Like I have friends in every category, if you can say, you
Yeah.
know. And so, but my closest friends, I would say one's a retired police officer, one's a retired detective, and then obviously my pastors, you know, and then a couple people actually that I was in prison with, but now they've changed their lives and we do ministry together. Like
I,
we
ju-
go
I
out.
just I just have to say, like, look where you came from. You came from like so much destruction on the streets and like probably hiding and running from the cops. And now your friend circle is detectives and, that's absolutely uh, it just goes to show that we can, outgrow what we grew up from.
Yeah. And the truth of it is because I had a couple bad experiences growing up as a kid where like there was a couple officers that just had it out for me, and they and one of them even choked me when I was a teenager with his billy club when I was telling the truth that time as to what address. Long story short, we were kids. We were walking from one city to another, coming back into our city, and we had a bottle of tequila. We stopped at 7-Eleven and poured it into a 7-Eleven cup and continued on our walk. And at the time, the address I was staying at was 7-Eleven, Orchard Place. And so the officer asked me where I lived, and I told him, and he thought I was lying. And he says, "You want to joke around?" He started choking me, and they started telling, and because of those situations, how can you say I categorized all cops were the same? I hated all cops after that.
Yeah.
And that's how it really was up until I surrendered my life to God.
And there are
You
good
know
cops out there.
what?
So there are good cops out there.
Yes, there's more good than bad. I will
Yeah.
say that. And I
Yeah.
honestly haven't had no bad experiences in Idaho,
Yeah.
even in my trouble days.
When you were in solitary, what was that like?
Honestly, it didn't bother me. Call me crazy. It didn't bother me at all. I actually didn't mind it because I was always like super clean, like everything had to be like spotless. And then I had a schedule where I was up at a certain time, went to bed at a certain time, and so whoever I lived with had to be willing to get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. And so and they couldn't go back to sleep till lights out, which is 9 p.m. And so really just the way that I was taught and trained in California in their system, once the doors pop, you're up and ready to go in case something happens. And so living by myself all those years, it really didn't bother me. I don't, yeah, but I got a good routine down. Like I would wake up and I used to like to box. So I would basically wake up, I would drink my coffee, turn on some music. I would roll up my mattress, hang it from the vent in like a heavy bag. And basically just like, that's how I would work. I would like to work out like that. I would watch TV. I would study the sports and really play chess through the vents, hours and hours of chess through the vents. You
Wow.
just number the chessboard 1 to 64, and that's how you can play through the vents.
Mm.
And but I don't know, it wasn't really bad. It wasn't a bad thing for me. I just kept saying if I have a chance to go home, that would be awesome.
Yeah. Wow. What would you say to those struggling with, addiction right now?
Honestly, I know this much. If you're struggling with addiction right now, there's a really, really good chance that you have trauma, you have hurt, you have pain, something has happened in your life, and you're trying to fill that void through using drugs.
Mhm.
And the only one that can set you free from that is Jesus. And you may not believe in God, but you've heard my story. I was a lost cause. Like the judicial system said, there was no hope for me. Honestly, when I would get locked up, it was almost like a vacation because I didn't have to worry about where I was going to sleep or where I was going to eat or anything like that. It was, I used to look at it that way. But you see, if you were to give Jesus a try, truly give him a try, 6 months of your life, total surrender to him, your life's never going to be the same. I promise you that. But you have to go all in. You can't hold on to anything from your past. And that's why John 3:16 says that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. So the enemy will try to tell you that you're so far gone in your addiction, that you may have done some really violent acts that you're having a hard time with the guilt and shame, and you're not able to forgive yourself for those. But it also says in Romans 10:9, if you confess Jesus Christ as Lord and believe in your heart that he is risen from the dead, you should be saved. So all you have to do is give all that to Jesus, and he'll set you free from all that. You just have to trust him. And I'm telling you from experience, because I never had the peace and the joy that I have today before Jesus. And I can't even explain it, but I know it comes from Jesus.
Oh, wow. That's powerful. So, for the locals, they can come find you at Boise Calvary.
Yeah, well, honestly, if there's anybody struggling with addiction that's watching this, you can email me at freedom@calvaryboise.com, or you can call the office at 208-321-7440, and they can get you connected with me. Or you can pop up on a Thursday at 7 p.m. and we have our Words of Freedom service in the lobby at 123 Auto Drive, Boise, Idaho 83709. And if I'm not currently there that week, I'm working out of town, but Marcus fills in for me. So Marcus West will be teaching the nights that I'm not there, or even when I am there sometimes.
I love it. So, thank you so much for sharing your story. I know when, you know, it's always hard being vulnerable sometimes, but you were so just strong and sharing your story and helping so many people. You came from literally the streets to saving people's lives and you just, outreaching so many people.
You're welcome. It was my honor to share. And just so I want people to know, I did share about the rough childhood, but today my dad is doing amazing. We do have an awesome relationship. There is restoration through Jesus. And my mom and her husband, I have a great relationship with both of them as well now too. So I just want people to know there is restoration if it's a healthy restoration where God can restore.
I think a lot of us need to hear that because a lot of family dynamics get broken because of childhood trauma and all like in alcohol. I think it tears a lot of people apart. And then it's nice to know there is restoration. Even your parents are friendly with each other. And that's pretty uncommon when you come from such a violent place.
Yeah. And I had a lot to do with my little sister. When she started having kids, she told my our parents, if you guys want to be around the grandkids, you got to learn to get along. And so they started learning to get along.
Wow, that's a good one because that's a really good one. I like that. But thank you so much, Chris, for being here. I really, truly appreciate it. And I do you have any big plans for your future and, helping more people?
Honestly, I still know like God has bigger plans for me, and really my heart one day is to do full-time ministry and not do plumbing no more. And I know in God's perfect timing he's going to open that door, and I know that will open more opportunities like in my heart to go into more prisons, to go into more juvenile halls, to go even to the parole offices and talk to the supervisors and talk to the parole officers and say, "Hey, look, how can I help more with the ones that do have faith or even don't, to help them with their addictions or their struggles." And I have all kinds of visions and ideas in my head, and only God knows what it all really looks like, but I know that why I'm on this earth, why I have breath in my lungs, I'm just going to continue to allow him to use me to the fullest, however that looks.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. You should write a book.
Yeah, I actually have started. I got the cover.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
No, so many people have told me that. You're probably like maybe I would say over a dozen people have told me that this year alone.
Well, there's another future plan for you.